Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's a video that I never really thought that I would be doing and putting on YouTube. This situation and subject is very personal to me, and I felt like it's something that I've always wanted to keep private because it's such a private situation. However, I feel like it will actually help people who are going through or who have gone through the same thing as to what I went through when I was younger, and learning to cope with the grief and loss of my mum. I was 11 or 12 years old when I lost my mum. So it was about 13 years ago I lost my mum, and going back that far is quite of a blur for me because I feel like I've gone through so much in my life and like so much grief and so much heartbreak. It's kind of a blur. Like I feel like your memory and your brain blocks out bad memories to make you not think about that because you don't want to go back to that situation. I remember the day my mum died very clearly and how I felt. I feel like after that, sort of the grieving process was it's just a blur to me. I don't really remember it, to be honest. Obviously, I remember the days where I used to be on the bedroom floor crying to myself at night when everyone else was asleep, like screaming into a pillow, because I used to think, how will I ever get past this? Like, I've lost my mum. Like, I used to be around my mum 24/7 when I was younger. I remember the really hard times of me sort of being alone. Like when I was younger, I never really wanted to talk about loss and the grief of my mum. I never wanted to talk about like my mum in general. It was something that I felt like it was awkward, and I feel like I had so much emotion inside of me that I bottled up for however long over the years, that if I ever spoke about my mum or spoke about the loss of my mum, I would just well up and I would cry, and I feel like I wouldn't stop crying. And I feel like that's why I just sort of avoided the question so many times. Like I would walk into a room and somebody would be talking about my mum, like my siblings, or somebody like a family friend would be sort of talking about my mum and would like try and get me to join in to talk about it, but I would just walk out. Like I wouldn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to talk about it because it made me emotional. I felt sad. It was almost like, as I was so young, it was so hard for me to wrap my head around it as to why it happened. So I feel like over the years of me grieving, I sort of bottled it up and tried to understand it myself and sort of patch things together for me to understand it. And I feel like it helped, but at the same time, I feel like if I spoke about it, it would have helped that process of me becoming, not over it, but like helping me to get over the grief a lot quicker. I think it was about 5 years after, or at least like 3 or 4 years after, I began to start talking about my mum, and I felt like it was more of a breeze. And I felt like every time I did talk about my mum, it was like almost like there was like a balloon. Like say if I had a balloon, and say if I started talking about my mum, it was like there was a hole in the balloon and it would just pop, and like all this emotion would come out. And it wasn't until, I think it was literally about, it must have been 5 years after my mum passed. I remember drinking with my friends, like being underage, like going to like house parties or something, or like we would just, as we were young, we used to go sort of sit on a field and like just have a bottle of wine, and we would get drunk because we were kids, and we would start talking about something and I would just get emotional. And I felt like it was all triggered, and it all came down to my mum and the loss of my mum, because I never let it out. Like I never allowed myself to cry in front of people. I never allowed myself to talk about it to people. So I felt like drinking with my friends really triggered that, and it really like allowed it to come out. But it was the first time I was with two of my best friends at the time. And I remember just crying about it, like uncontrollably, like I couldn't stop crying about it. And then they started crying too, and then we were all just sort of sat on this field drinking, crying together. And I remember it was the first time I actually came out and I actually explained how I was feeling and how it felt. And obviously they didn't understand because they had both of their parents, and sort of they'd never gone through anything like that. But it allowed me to sort of get past the talking stage. I think from then on, it was still hard for me to talk about it, but I feel like I pushed myself to talk about it. I then remember going to a house party when I was older. I think I must have been about 17. Again, we were drinking, and I met this girl for the first time. Her name was Georgia, and Georgia, if you're watching this, I love you so much. Georgia had gone through the exact same thing as to what I'd gone through, and obviously we were both drunk, and we both, in the house party, like getting to know each other, and the situation came up. I don't know how it came up, but we basically both came up with the loss of our mum. We were at the same age, it was sort of the same thing and as to how it happened, and yeah, it was just crazy. And I felt like finally I had someone to relate to, because obviously when it first happens, you feel like obviously people that are around you and your family and your friends, they're going through the same thing as you, but you don't have younger friends or the people that are the same age as you that have gone through the same sort of thing who you can relate to. So having Georgia around me at that time, I felt like it was crazy. It was amazing at the same time. Like I was literally so thankful that I had met her at that time, to actually have someone to relate to around that. We literally had the same thing happen to us at such a young age, and we were both sort of through the grieving process. So I felt like that really helped a lot. Throughout obviously school, I met Georgia after I left school. So obviously throughout my school life was really hard and difficult to sort of come to terms with it, because at that age, in that era, was the word saying your mum. So if you would say something to somebody, especially boys, you would say, can you not take, for example, can you not do that? And they'll be like, why? And then you'll be like, because of this. And they'll be like, your mum. Like, it really hit home for me. And obviously I know sometimes, no, they don't know the situation, so you sort of brush it off and like don't sort of like push it past it. Like you just sort of get past that and not think about it. But it is so hard to sort of bite your tongue, and obviously at that age I didn't really want to talk about it anyway. So having someone sort of trying to joke about like your mum as a comment was so immature. And I get it was just one of those things that kids do when they were growing up, and they probably still do it now, to be honest. But when you've genuinely lost your mum, it's quite of a hit at home. Growing up in school, obviously, I felt like it was the main time, especially secondary school, where I needed my mum. Obviously, I had my dad, and my dad's been amazing throughout everything. Like, he's literally taken on so much, and I literally love him to pieces. Like, I couldn't be thankful enough for him. I literally don't know what I've done without him, to be honest. But obviously, for being a girl and going through secondary school and coming on my period, and like, do you know what I mean? You need another woman in your life to sort of talk about things like that and help you through it. And I felt like big situations like that in my life, like first coming on my period, or first getting a boyfriend, or first relationship breakup, you need a woman figure in your life to talk about that. And I don't get me wrong, I have so many people to talk about that, like my sisters, my aunties, my best friends, like my friend's mum. Like, I have so many people in my life who I can talk to and go to about that, and I'm literally so thankful for it. But I feel like there's nobody quite like your mum. Do you know what I mean? Like, you always need your mum in your life. And I feel like obviously through secondary school it was the hardest time for me to actually grieve. Because I was still grieving, so I was still so young, so I was trying to like learn life without my mum, and sort of pick up things and do things that, I don't know, like I feel like what my mum would have guided me to do, but I was sort of doing on my own. And obviously my dad helped me guided me through life like so well. But I feel like obviously mum was always a big part of me, because I was always with her 24/7 when I was younger. I feel like the one thing that I can say is it definitely gets better, and I feel like anybody who is going through it or who has gone through it needs to know that it does get better. There is light at the end of the tunnel. I know when it first happens and you're first told that you've lost someone so close to you, it almost feels like the world is broken into two, like there's no going back from that. But it does get better over time, and I don't think it gets better within months. Obviously each day gets easier, but I feel like a good few years after the loss it starts to get better. Because I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, 2 months after. You'll feel better 2 months after. You'll feel like you're learning to cope with it. But I think it all depends on what age you are as well. Obviously, I was such a young age, so I can only go back and tell you guys what I've gone through from that age group to now. I feel like obviously I could have got over it quicker if I was at this age of losing her, because I would have had her through my childhood for longer. So I would have like gone through things for her to shape me and teach me things that I needed to know when I was a teenager, and when I was obviously a young adult, she would have shown me those ways to do that. But obviously I felt like I've sort of taught myself it, or obviously learnt it from my dad. So I feel like for me, obviously it took like at least, I don't know, to be honest. I feel like it's such a blur back in the past that it is so hard to think back to it, because it is such a blur. Like, don't get me wrong, like some days I used to be like on the floor when everyone was asleep at night, screaming into a pillow, like crying, because I was so broken. And everybody used to obviously say how strong I was, like on a day-to-day basis, because they didn't see the other side of me, of how broken and how upset and how emotional I was. So I feel like obviously people saying how strong you are is really good, and it does really help you, but at the same time I think it also, especially if you don't talk about it, it makes you bottle it up more, because people are saying that you're really strong and you want to be strong for them, so like you're sort of painting a front to help them get through it as well. Before my mum died as well, I remember literally when I was younger, I used to want a cat so badly, and I remember begging my parents for a cat, and they were like, no, we're not getting one, not getting one. I remember we were going on a holiday to France, and a kitten ran across the road. He nearly got run over. My dad went and like saved him. It was absolutely fine. And we were in France at the time, and we managed to find somebody who would take him in, and we called him Lucky. And since then I always wanted a kitten. It must have been like 10 or 11. Always wanted a kitten, and I remember begging my parents for one. They finally gave in, and I went and got my cat Smokey. And then obviously when we went to pick Smokey up, there was also his sister, who nobody really wanted. She was the last one left, and they were like, we don't know what to do with her, like we need to get rid of her. So we took her as well, because we're like, we're not leaving her if nobody wants her, like that's horrible. We'll take them, they can be together. One for me, one for my brother. If it wasn't for Smokey, I'm not even exaggerating this, if it wasn't for Smokey, my cat, I don't know how I would have got through it, to be honest. Like, I don't know how I would have grieved and got through the loss of my mum without my cat. He has literally been my safety blanket throughout everything. Even when I'm sad, he knows when I'm sad. If I'm crying, he comes over and he purrs, and they're like natural healers. Honest to God, cats, even dogs, are natural healers. They can sense when you're upset. They like absorb all the emotion from you and like release it. And I feel like if it wasn't for him, I genuinely don't know where I would be now. Like I don't know. This, like, he's literally helped me through everything, and I feel like the day, he's getting old now, and I feel like the day it comes to him not being here anymore, I literally don't know what I'm gonna do, because he's been my buddy since the loss of my mum. And I feel like that's one thing that has helped me replace sort of my mum. And I know not everybody's sort of in the situation that they're able to sort of get a pet after the loss or the grief that they're going through, but I can tell you now that it will help you a lot. And if you can't financially afford it, or you're not in the situation to be able to afford a pet, then obviously try and find a situation that will help you in the long run. Like even having like a journal. Like I remember when I was younger, my family members used to like we had like this box given to me. It was my auntie's. She gave me a box, and like I could put some of my mum's jewellery in it, and I could put like, had a little notebook and a pen, and I could write in it like I was talking to my mum, and like it was really cute. And I had it for years and years and years and years, but I kept like a lock of my mum's hair in it as well, and I've still got it upstairs. But I felt like that it helped me, but at the same time, like with journals, it wasn't for me. Like I wasn't the type of person to sit and like write about stuff, or sit and I don't know, it wasn't for me. Like, obviously it works for some people, and I feel like if it works for you, then definitely do it, because it can help with you in the long run. But for me, I felt like that wasn't the answer. I feel like throughout your life and throughout the grieving process, you will sort of teach yourself what you need and what you don't need in your life. And I feel like you'll come to terms with things on your own. I think that's so important. Like, I used to always turn to quotes. I used to always, especially when I'm sad, I look at quotes a lot and I try to relate to it, and it helps me to know that I'm not alone, and I know that there's other people around that have gone through the same thing. I felt like if YouTube was quite big back then as well, like people doing vlogs and talking about their life, that would have helped me a lot. And I feel like today, as I'm sat here talking to you guys, I feel like that is one thing that I want to help people with, to know that they're not alone and to go through it, and whatever they're feeling is normal. It's natural. If you feel angry, I think the ways of grief comes in so many different aspects, where you feel numb. Like, I just felt numb at first, and I felt like you just don't feel like anything. Like, you don't feel like crying, you don't feel angry, you don't feel sad, you just feel nothing. Like, it is so weird to explain it. It's nothing. You don't feel anything. It's just like you're blank. Like a piece of white blank paper. That's how you feel. It's just nothing. And then you start thinking about the situation more, and I think you get sad and you get angry, and you just go through the emotions, and it is normal. It is so normal, but you need to notice them as you're going through it. And I feel like, obviously, if it's your first time going through grief, you just need to let it happen. You need to take each day as it comes. You need to know that you're not alone, and you need to think they are always still around you, no matter what. They're always here. You can't see them, but they are always here. And I feel like if you learn that, it will help you through it a lot. I feel like now, if I went through grief or the loss of a loved one, I don't know, obviously I can't rule out and say how I will be, because I don't know. Because the last time that I grieved was when I lost my mum, and that was 12 or 13 years ago. It was a long time ago. Trying to think back to that time is a blur. I know I keep saying it, but it's a blur. So I feel like anybody that is going through it, just listen to your emotions, like listen to your heart, listen to your head, listen to your gut. Understand, like allow yourself time by yourself to have you time, like cry. Like, even sometimes, especially on anniversaries or like birthdays or Christmases, like big events, I need time to myself. Like, especially on Mother's Day is the one day that I need time for me. I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to talk about it, because obviously it's like a day off social media. Everyone's posting stuff, and even though we're so happy that everyone has their mums and like is able to celebrate with their mums and show them how loved and appreciated they are, it is so sad for the people who have lost their mum to go through that day and just like think, I wish you were here. Like, obviously we want to celebrate with you, and it's the same as Father's Day. If someone's lost their dad, like, it's sort of a day off social media. Going forward, I think, like, looking into the future, the big things that will really affect my mum not being here is the day I get married. Her not being at the wedding, I feel like, will be such a hit to home. And I think about that day all the time. Like, I analyse it. Like, I don't think about my wedding or what I'm gonna wear, or like the guests, or like anything like that. Like, I feel like I'm not at the stage in my life where I'm ready to get married yet. So it's sort of one of those things that are in the future, that's something else that I think about. But I do think about my mum not being there, sort of how I will be. And obviously it's such a happy, exciting day because you're getting married, but there will always be, I feel like there'll be down times on that day, like especially obviously in the morning and like walking down the aisle. I feel like there will always be that down time because you're thinking of them and you're wishing that they were there. Like, that's such a big event. As well as having my first child, that will hit home a lot, and I feel like obviously that's an obstacle that I need to overcome when it gets here, and I will sort of learn to do that when the time comes for that, obviously. So, but I don't know, I think about those days all the time, and I think that's the main thing on anniversaries that breaks me, that really makes me think. On a day-to-day basis, you don't think of things like that. Like, I think about my mum all the time, don't get me wrong, and I miss her every day, and there will always be a part of her that's missing. I think over time, it gets so much easier. Like, on the day-to-day basis, I don't feel empty. Like, I feel like she's around me all the time, and I feel like now I've got to that point in life where I've learned to accept it, and learned to accept that she's not coming back. That's the hardest thing that you can do. It's the thought, when you're grieving and you're going through it, it's the thought, they're not coming back. And I think that's the biggest, hardest thing, was accepting that. But it's almost like over time it sort of blurs into it naturally, like almost like they're around you all the time. Like, I just feel like she's around me, like she's looking down on me, she's with me. And it's made it easier for me to get used to that, and get used to that she's not here every day. I think it's quite hard for me to sort of sit here and analyse and go through the grief from what I went through, because it was so long ago. But the one thing that I can say is talk about it. Don't bottle it up, because it's the one thing that I did, was bottle it up for so long. And it's like a Coke bottle, and you put like a Mento in it, and you screw the lid so tight, and it's like fizzing inside, like it's waiting to get exploded. It's literally like fizzing, and you know, if you open that bottle, the whole thing is just going to explode. And I feel like that's what happened to me. Was when I was younger, I just was bottling up. So it's like I had this Coke bottle that was like half full, and I was putting Mentos in it, and I was like I had something that I needed to talk about, but I wouldn't talk about it. And I would put it in this bottle and put it in this bottle, and I'd keep doing it, pushing it down. And then I just screwed the cap on, screwed it on as tight as I could. And then one day, when I was old enough, I had a drink with my friends illegally, because I was still underage, and I felt like I could talk about it, or I felt like I needed to talk about it. It just came out, and we started talking about it, and I just opened the bottle, and it just went everywhere. Like, it just exploded, and all my emotions, everything that I was feeling or felt when I was younger, it all came out. And I felt so much better after it. It was very traumatic, because we were all crying, and I was crying, and I felt like it was something that needed to happen. But I felt so much pressure lifted off my shoulders after it happened. So I feel like, instead of letting that happen, and I know it's easy for me to sit here and say don't bottle it up, because at the time you feel like the only thing that's easier, to, instead of putting your burden on somebody else about how you feel, you bottle it up to yourself, and you're just like, oh, I'll deal with that later. Even if you have to go to counselling, I feel like that's such a good option to do that, and I've never done that as a kid, and I had the opportunity to do it, but I felt like I didn't need that. But obviously over time, when I got to a teenager that was still underage and I was drinking, I felt like it all came out then. And it's so lucky that I had those friends to talk to about that. But definitely allow yourself to talk about it. Even if you sit there in a room talking to yourself, it doesn't matter. Like, even if you feel like you're talking to the person that you've lost, even though you can't see them, I feel like it's such a good opportunity to allow your emotions to come out, for you to understand how you feel as well. I feel like the loss of my mum, I will obviously never get over fully, because it was something so unexpected, and I feel like there's so many questions as to why. Like, why did it happen? Why me? Why her? Why our family? Why this? Why that? Like, there's obviously so many questions that are always going to be unanswered. And I can't answer those questions. So I feel like that's something you make situations up in your head, don't you? You don't have the answer to it, so you make it up yourself. And I think the worst thing as well is to never blame yourself for it. Like, never feel like you could have done more, or never feel like that. I feel like if you've been you've always been like so supportive throughout it. And I feel like obviously with things like me, for so unexpectedly, like how my mum passed was so unexpected, there's obviously always going to be questions as to why, and oh, I could have done more, I wish I noticed this, and I wish I'd done this. But that's normal, that's also a part of grief. But I feel like you should never put that on you and never make yourself feel like you could have done more, because nobody could have done more than what they did. I just wanted everyone to know sort of what I'd been through, and to know that they're never alone in a situation like this. Like, even if you want to ask me questions or want to talk to me or private message me about something, then please do. I am always here to talk about anything that you need to worry. If you're going through it right now, if you've been through it, if you feel like a certain way and you don't understand why, message me, ask me. I would rather you put your burden on me than feel like you can't put it on anybody else. I feel like when somebody has gone through grief or loss with a close loved one, you almost feel like you don't want to be here anymore. And I don't wish that upon anybody. So I just wanted to make this video to make people aware that you are not alone. You are not alone through it. The way you're feeling is normal, it's natural. You can feel 100, 1,001 emotions all the time, but it's normal. Some days you may even like go through months of feeling fine, like feeling amazing, feeling happy, and like you think about them like here and there, but you don't feel sad, and then you start to feel guilty that you don't feel sad, but you shouldn't, because again, it's a part of grieving process. There's so many different parts of grief, can't stress it enough, that make you feel certain ways, and then you question it. And it's normal to question it because you've not gone through it before, you're not used to that situation. You could be one day like, you could be happy for like a month, like having the best time, and one day you could just have an off day. Or you could boil the kettle. I've done it before, boiled the kettle, made a cup of tea, put it down, picked it up and spilt it, and I just cried. And I didn't understand why I was crying. Like, why am I crying? I've literally just spilled a cup of tea and I'm crying about it. It was a part of grief. I didn't realise it at the time, but it was like, because I bottled up so many emotions, and I felt like I was fine for such a long period of time, that me spilling a cup of tea was all it took to break that bubble, to burst that bubble and let my emotions come out. And I had a cry and I felt fine after it, but I was like, what was that about? It was a part of grief. It comes in so many different ways and like waves, and it's crazy. Like, I can't even begin to like explain it to somebody who hasn't gone through it. But the people that have gone through it, or are going through it, please know you're not alone, and please know that everything that you are feeling is normal and it's natural, and I am always here if you want to talk about it. I feel like that's sort of all that I can sort of explain. That's all I can sort of think of explaining as to what I went through, in not so much depth to still have privacy for me, because I feel like I don't want to open up fully about that situation, but I just want to sort of open the door to know and let people know that they're not alone, and I've gone through it as well. And I hope people, if someone stumbles across this video in the future, that you can message me about it, and to just know what you're thinking and feeling is normal. I feel like I'm gonna end this video here, sort of on a positive note, that it doesn't last forever. It gets better over time, I promise you. So if anybody is sort of going through the situation at the minute, please know you're not alone.